Please sit comfortably and close the eyes. Put your attention on the silence that is always there deep in the mind. Connect with that silence. Become the silence. You are the silent witness. Now listen to the words of the Yoga Vasishta from the perspective of the silent witness. Book 4, Chapter 31, continuing with verse 37. We have also sprung from that divine will like Dhamma and others. Therefore, there is no reality or unreality in any of us, except at the time when we exist or cease to do so. This infinite and formless void of consciousness is omnipresent and all-pervading. In whatever form this consciousness manifests itself, in any place, it appears there in the same figure and manner. As divine consciousness expanded itself with the images of Dhamma and others, it immediately assumed those shapes by its notions of the same. So it is with every one of us, that all things are produced to our view according to our notions, presented to our consciousness. What we call the world is the representation of things to us as in our dream. It is a hollow body like a bubble, rising in an empty ocean of consciousness and appearing as the water in a mirage. The waking state of the empty intellect is called the phenomenal world, and its state of sleep and rest is what we call liberation, emancipation, or salvation from pain. But consciousness, which never sleeps, nor has to be awakened at any time, is the emptiness of the divine mind, in which the world is ever present in its visible form. There is the work of creation, is united with the rest of nirvana, and the cessation of the act of creation is joined with uninterrupted quiet. Yet, No difference whatever exists in God between alternating work and rest at any time. The divine intellect views its own form in the world, and it views the world in itself, in its true sense. Like a blinded eye sees the inner light in its orbit. The divine intellect, like the blinded eye, sees nothing outside, but views every form within itself. This is because there is no visible or phenomenal world other than what is within the empty sphere of the intellect. There are all these things everywhere, as we have ideas of them in our minds. But there is never anything anywhere if we have no previous idea of it in the mind. It is the one quiet spirit of God, which lies extended in all these forms, coming to our knowledge. Therefore, knowing him as all in all, give up your fears and sorrows and duality. Rest in peace in his unity. The great intellect of God is as solid and clear as a block of crystal, which is both dense and transparent in the middle, in the inside. They appear to be all hollow within, but replete with the images of all things from without. Chapter 32. Dhamma, Vyala, and Kata finally attain their liberation, like all other virtuous souls, and become released from the torments of hell. Like children getting rid of their fear of yaksha demons and pisakakos. Vasishtha replied, "Hear, O support of Raghu's race, what Yama said about Dhamma, Vyala, and their companion when they asked for their liberation through his attendance in hell. Yama said that Dhamma and others would obtain their liberation upon death, releasing them from their demonic bodies, and upon hearing the account of their lives and actions. Rama said, "Tell me, sage, how, when, and from what source did Dhamma and others come to learn of the accounts of their lives and how they attained their release from hell?" Vasishtha replied, "These demons transformed into fish in a pool by the bank of the great lotus lake in Kashmir. Then went to many miserable births in their fish-like forms in that same pond. In that marshy ground, they were crushed to death under the feet of buffalo. Then they were transported into the shapes of cranes, frequenting the lake of lotuses. They fed upon moss and mushrooms and tender petals of lotuses. They had to live among the leaves of aquatic plants and vines that floated on the surface of the waves. They swung in cradles of flowers, rested on beds of blue lotuses, dived in vortices of the water, and flew under the cooling showers of rainy clouds. At last, these charming cranes and herons were cleansed of their brutish foulness by their vegetable food of sweet fruits and flowers, and by their pure beverage of the crystal lake, the food of holy saints. Having by these means obtained a clear understanding, they were prepared for their release from their brutish states. Like men who have become able to distinguish and get hold of the good and virtuous qualities of sattva, purity, balance, and raja, activity, from the evil of tamas, passivity, are entitled to the liberation. Now in the happy valley of Kashmir, there is a city by the name of Adhisthana, which is surrounded on all sides by mountains and trees. It is very romantic in appearance. In the middle of that city, there is a hill known as Pradyumna Sekhara. It resembles a pistil rising from the center of a lotus flower, with its high turrets that appear like pinnacles above its summit. On the northeast corner of that building, there is a hollow at the top of its towering turret. It is overgrown with moss and continually resounds to the blowing winds. There are the demon Yava in the form of a sparrow, built his nest and chirped his meaningless notes, like one who repeats Vedic hymns without knowing their meaning. At that time, there was a king in that city named Yakshakara, or the renowned, who reigned there like Indra over the gods in heaven. The demon Dhamma became a gnat and dwelt in that building, and continued to buzz his low tune in the crevice of a lofty column. It came to pass that the citizens of Adhisthana prepared a playground named the Ratnavati Vihara in that city. There resided the king's minister, Narasimha by name. He understood the fates of humankind just as the astronomer knows the stars of heaven on a small celestial globe, which he holds in his hand. It also happened at that time that the deceitful demon Kata was as reborn as a parrot and became the minister's favorite, kept in a silver cage in his house. It then turned out that the minister recited the poetic story of the war between demons and gods to the residents of his palace. The parrot Kata happened to hear it. He remembered his past life, whereby he was absolved of his sins and attained his final liberation. The sparrow living on top of Pradyumna Hill also chanced to hear the story of his life in that palace, and he obtained his liberation thereby. Dhamma, who lived in the palace in the form of a gnat, also happened to hear the minister's recital of his tale, and thereby obtained his peace and release. What we're reading here is an interesting account of how one can achieve the balancing of karmic traces through the reliving of past life experiences. In this manner, O Ram, the sparrow on Pradyumna Hill, the gnat in the palace, and the parrot in the playground all had their liberation. Thus, I have told you the whole story of Dhamma and the others, which should fully convince you of the vanity of the world. Only the ignorant are tempted to vanity by their error, just as those led to the delusion of water in a mirage. Even the great are liable, like these demons, to fall low by their error. Think how one of these demons, who had reduced the high Meru and Mandara mountains with a nod of his eyebrows, was constrained to remain as a contemptible gnat in the crack of a pillar in the palace. Look at the other, who threatened to destroy the sun and moon with a slap, living at last as a poor sparrow in a hole of the peak of Pradyumna Hill. And look at the third, who balanced Mount Meru like a flower bouquet in his hand, lying imprisoned as a parrot in the cage at the house of Narasimha. When the sphere of consciousness is colored with ego, it is debased into another form and another birth without changing its nature. A man's wrong desires make him take the truth for untruth, just like a person's excessive thirst makes him mistake a mirage for water. Thereby, he loses both his way and his life. Only those men can cross the ocean of the world who, by the natural bent of their good understanding, are inclined to study scriptures and look forward to their liberation by rejecting whatever is vicious and untrue. Those prone to false reasoning and thereby and heresy by rejecting revelation are subject to various changes in misery. They lose the best of life and fall like running water into a pit. But those who walk by the dictates of conscience and follow the path pointed by the Vedas they are saved from destruction and attain their best state. O high-minded Ram, he whose greed makes his mind always long after having this thing and that thing loses the highest goal of his being, parama purushartha, leaving not even ashes or any other trace behind. The high-minded man regards the world like straw and shuns all its concerns, like a snake casting off its skin. He whose mind is illumined by the wonderful sight of truth is always taken under the protection of the gods, just as a cosmic egg is protected by Brahma. Nobody should walk in paths that are long and wearisome, crooked and winding, and surrounded by dangers and difficulties. Rahu, the ascending node of the moon, lost its life by its curved course to drink the nectarine beams of the moon. He who abides by the dictates of the true scriptures and associates with the best of men is never subject to the darkness of error. Those renowned for their virtues have the power to bring their destiny under their command, convert all their evils to good, and render their prosperity perpetual. Those who are unsatisfied with their qualifications, and those who thirst after knowledge and are seekers of truth, are truly called human beings. All others are only brutes. Those whose hearts are like lakes, brightened by the moonbeams of fame, have the form of Vishnu seated in their hearts, just as the sea of milk. Now we'll continue from the perspective of the silent witness. By starting the process of Trimana Sanyama on the esoteric Mahamantra. And with this practice, we will balance all the karmic traces that have been enlivened by this reading of the Yoga Vasishta. Jai Guru Dev.